Welcome and thank you for joining us for this IHEAM webinar. My name is Victoria Emerton and I'm the Conference Director for Healthcare Estates. The webinar will be presented by Dr. Evangelia Chrysikou, Lecturer at the Bartlett Real Estate Institute, University College London, and Malcolm McFrederick, who's the Director at the Camden and Islington NHS Foundation Trust. The presentation is called St Pancras Mental Health Buildings Redevelopment, Using International Evidence, Best Practice and Experimentation for Supporting Multi-Stakeholder Dialogue. I'd like to hand over to Dr. Chrysikou now. Thank you very much.
Hi, hello, Victoria. Thank you. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me properly. So, how I will speak about, how this whole project started. This is a project that has been a collaboration between us, the Bartlett Real Estate Institute, and me, who I'm running the program Healthcare Facilities for the MSc program Healthcare Facilities for the Bartlett, and the Camden and Islington NHS Trust. And actually, it has been a fascinating project for us. So I have been researching on mental health buildings in several continents for more than 20 years. And at some point, we had a small project that I ran with my team in UCL. And this was about looking at the mental health facilities and compare them to the healthcare facilities of the same catchment area. And this has been an example of two different images that show to us very clearly about how we need to invest in, how much we still need to invest in our mental health facilities. And this is one of the picture on the, I don't know if this is on your left. This has been from St Pancras Hospital. So St Pancras Hospital, it's an old historic hospital of London, but as a mental health hospital, it has been quite obsolete. Now, this was clear from our small project, but it has been also clear for the trust. And since the whole area of the St Pancras, since the whole St Pancras area has been significantly redeveloped, the St Pancras Hospital has now a significant value. And in that sense, the trust is able, but Malcolm will explain more about that, to use that to modernize the whole spectrum of the services that the trust is providing. So, and this is a unique opportunity. This is probably one of the biggest projects that I have ever heard on mental health as a holistic development of a whole trust. And it's also a very interesting project because it's in the heart of London. It's a building that, in fact, it looks, and it is an old asylum. And this, at the same time, it's the opportunity for the trust to develop one of the most extensive and modern redevelopments of psychiatric provision in the last years. So this is a massive project and a very important one. And these are images from projects that exist now in the trust that we had looked during our research project, and they show that, there is still a significant way that needs to be covered in order to have truly therapeutic environments for mentally ill people. But at the same time, this is a golden opportunity now, and this is going to be materialized. So our role as researchers was to support the trust on how these institutional environments could be turned to inspiring environments, because this is technically the opportunity of the century. This is like a project that is the project of the century, to my opinion. for the trust. So improve the quality of psychiatric built environment and their neighborhoods, because psychiatric buildings now are part of their neighborhood. Change the institutional image, provide supported environments for people to heal, and be on the first line of international excellence on the subject. So these were the aims that the new project would have to cover. So for us, we had to think with an eye of the future, because such a major redevelopment project is not something that can happen every day. So what is fit for purpose for the future, and for now, for the future, and ideal for the users in terms of mental health care provision? And we did a research project which was there to support the trust, to start a dialogue and with the service users, with their staff, with the local community. So a dialogue of the trust, and at the same time this dialogue to include the architects and the planners that were involved in the project, and give them the opportunity to start this dialogue with some tools. So our role was to provide these tools. So we had to look at certain aspects that were important to the trust, with an emphasis on the hubs that the trust wants to develop, but also the inpatient environments. And we did a very extensive literature review, and at the same time looked at the projects that currently exist and could be considered as inspiring, both in mental health and healthcare, because there could be examples that we could use from both sectors. We involved some international experts who operate in their areas, in their countries, like in France, in the US, in the Netherlands, in Germany, on how these countries operate now and what are the exciting projects we should be aware in their locations. And also we visited some projects that we consider were should be included and had something to offer. For us, in order to evaluate our findings, we used the SCP model, which is a model that I have developed at the Bartlett for the planning, the evaluation and the design of psychiatric environments. And it is a model that looks at the three major aspects that consist mental health care environments. And in a nutshell, are the three axes that would allow us to place any building on aspects of safety and security, on competence, and on personalization and choice. As I said, we looked at different countries. So these are the regions that we looked for examples. And with an emphasis in Europe, which was closer to us, but it's also one of the places with North America that are more advanced in mental health care. We looked at an extensive range of subjects, and then we classified these areas. One of the important aspects was how users could be involved, and by users I mean both staff and patients. At international examples in terms of building, in terms of layout, in terms of interior, in terms of old age, because old age is something that we normally didn't discuss in mental health premises, but now it's something that we need to bring into the conversation, location, and details. So there were findings on how to engage the groups and which the groups that should be engaged in the dialogue should be, and how other trusts around the world have engaged these people. We looked at the provision, what the trusts tend to provide, what the examples that we looked at provided, and which was a range of treatments, therapies, and opportunities that took place in the buildings. We looked at the location of these buildings and services, and what are the major aspects that should be considered. We looked at the exteriors and all the subjects that are relevant to the discussion about the exteriors, from stigma to access and accessibility to connection with the neighborhood, green aspects, healing aspects. And we came up with several examples. The layout in terms of safety, accessibility, choices that the environment supports, understanding of the premises. So we looked at the spatial characteristics and how people can navigate in the spaces. The interior and how the different trusts provided for those, the affordance of these environments, and an emphasis on details. And these details we looked again, as before, in a very holistic way, looking from anything from air quality to colors and safety and privacy and how this could be accommodated in these environments. Here, for example, we looked at even technology because this is a gigantic screen, interactive screen that it is in a seclusion room. And we looked at the art, the lighting, the placemaking in these environments. As I said, old people and their needs and how this can be accommodated in mental health settings. And overall, we created a very integrated list of topics, but with a focus on patients and out-of-the-box thinking and challenging aesthetics and design for innovation. So, for example, examples that could bring light and sun in very deep buildings. This is a very interesting example. This has been a psychiatric facility in Scandinavia. It shows how different nations think about their psychiatric environments. Here we can see the roof, and by the slope of the roof, we can understand inside the building how intense is the environment and the need for treatment. So the intensity that happens that exists inside the building is expressed on the exterior. For me, it's something that is very interesting. It is very far from the idea of psychiatric environments that we discuss in this country, but it's worth seeing just to give us the impression that different people think of mental illness in different terms. We don't need to agree, but it's worth seeing these differences. This was a very interesting aspect where patients in a psychiatric hospital created these small goodie bags for other patients to have once they occupy the room when these patients would leave, as a gift that says, I was there and then you will be there, because this is something that the patient prepared when they were leaving the facility for the new person that would have their room to hope. And of course, aspects of art, like here, who created a very popular landmark in a young people's hospital, opportunities for exercise, opportunities for social activity. This is like an outdoor gym area in a facility for psychiatric patients in the Netherlands. Opportunity to bring the views of the city inside the premises for people not to feel isolated if they cannot go out. And this is a very interesting example. Again, very, very edgy, very controversial. This is for a psychiatric facility in Italy. And if somebody thinks about the ligature of this country, this is probably a thing that I don't know, they would be very surprised how this space is in a psychiatric facility, but it demonstrates how different countries think differently about mental health and the different ideas that coexist at this time on the planet. And the Panama Clinic, which is a very interesting example because it brings different medical functions together. Mental health is one of those, and this is very close to integration of services. And there is no stigma here because you have healthcare as a whole. And examples were art. And one of my favorite examples, I found it almost by accident. I was for a medical conference in Slovenia, and there was this little shop in one of the most expensive real estate spots of Ljubljana. And this was actually a small shop that was for tourists to buy gifts, but it was in one of the best parts of the city, one of the most expensive buildings of the city. It was ground floor, and it was operated by people who suffered from mental illness. And they, at the same time, this was a gift shop, and this was a service, because service users could come into the shop. There was a couch and a sofa, and they could have a nice cup of coffee or tea in one of the best locations and be able to speak. And the till at the same time had a computer and a phone line that was operating as a support line. So it was technically an outreach facility and a community hub and the gift shop at the same spot, but it was in one of the most expensive locations and the most prized locations of Ljubljana. And for me, this is the essence of the institutionalization. And also, the other example that impressed me, and you saw it at the beginning of my presentation, is this boat on River Seine, which is a day center for mentally ill people. Now, it's a floating facility. It is very much penetrated by light. Actually, when the shutters are open, people can know that the facility is open and there for them to seek support. But it's a very interesting example of a very nice boat. The boats of the Seine are famous for mentally ill people to use, and it's definitely a landmark. And this is a very nice method for the trust, so they could turn what they have, and this is like from the existing building that needs to be redeveloped, and the trust is doing so, to an asset, like here, which is the Gosh Hospital, and they have a very similar architectural feature, and they have it as a piece of art. And even better, the boat. So this was from me. Thank you. And I stop my sharing, and Malcolm can represent the trust and speak a bit more about what they are doing.
Okay, thanks, Leah, for that. What I'm now going to do is describe how we took that work forward. So my name is Malcolm McFrederick. I'm the Transformation Programme Director at Camden and Islington NHS Foundation Trust. So essentially, it is how we built on the process of the research done by our partners at UCL. And what I'm briefly going to talk to you today is about a little bit about us, but more importantly, I think in terms of this seminar, is how we took our urban environment to tackle mental health stigma, how we co-designed our new facilities, and how we overcame those challenges of creating well-being spaces, in particular in an urban environment. So just a bit about us is we provide adult mental health and substance misuse services in 2 boroughs in central London, Islington and Camden. And to put that in context, Islington is the borough with the highest population density in London, and Camden isn't the highest population density because it has Hampstead Heath. But if you take Hampstead Heath out, it would beat Islington. So essentially, it's inner city, high population density, 4 major railway mainline stations end in the centre of our patch, transient population, high levels of psychosis, so acute mental health problems. Our work is that we have, at the top end, inpatient facilities. So we have 2 sets of inpatient facilities, which we're going to bring together in this project, one up in Highgate and one down at the St Pancras Hospital site. And we have a whole range of community facility services, which are secondary mental health services, but we run them across 30 areas. So there's specialist community, post-traumatic stress disorder, rehabilitation, psychotic, you name it. But the key thing that we recognise in the work that we do, and therefore in the estate strategy that we have to follow, is that mental illness is often triggered by life stresses. It's not just medicine. Mental health illness is triggered by relationships, housing, money problems, benefits, unemployment, physical health, and other trauma. And we need to recognise that those social determinants of mental health are just as important as the medical support that we give. So we have a clinical strategy that reflects that holistic approach to what we do, and we wish to therefore prevent people going into crisis, prevent people needing acute services where they are in an inpatient unit. And the estate redevelopment programme is primarily there to support what we're trying to do clinically. And if your estate strategy doesn't, then I think there is a mistake in that. We are merely an enabler. So in practice, what we've been looking to do is to say, we're going to expand our community, our outpatient services to prevent people going into crisis. We want that wraparound approach that I've been talking about earlier. And the other thing is, it's very important in mental health to produce your services as co-production with your service users, your patients, and staff, because they know what it's like to be in need. So, turning to our estate then, the challenges with the existing estate is that essentially, as Leah's already talked about, is some of our community buildings are truly not fit for purpose. They're old, and in particular, they're stigmatising. And also, we have some of our inpatient units are on St Pancras Hospital site, which is consists of old Victorian workhouses. It has the last leprosy ward in the UK is one of our wards at the moment, so it's not necessarily an up-to-date mental health ward. And you can probably see it. So if you ever arrive at St Pancras Station and you're heading into the station, if you look out the right-hand side of the train windows as you arrive, you'll see that water tower, which is in the centre of the picture, and some of the old Victorian buildings, and that is us. I just thought we'd start with that, addressing stigmatising buildings, and I just wanted to sort of state is that these are some of our buildings, but on the other hand, they are not atypical for mental health buildings in the UK, in cities. And if you are referred to a secondary mental health service by your GP for the first time, you're worried about what it is that you've suddenly been diagnosed with a mental health issue or a mental health problem, and then you get told to go along for your first patient appointment at somewhere like one of these things. That really does not put you in a great place for the start of getting better, of your recovery, and we really want to do something about that. So we've got plans to transform our estate. So we're looking to build a new inpatient facility up in Highgate. And it's actually right next to an acute hospital called the Whittington, so that we can do some shared care of our elderly patients. And it's, again, very over the road from the rest of our inpatient facilities. We're going to actually redevelop some of the land that we're going to use to generate money at the St Pancras site, where we're going to have a new building and work with UCL and to develop a new Institute of Mental Health. And we're going to try and bring some of our 30 small buildings together into a transport hubs, into some vibrant, integrated community mental health places. So this whole business of urban environment and mental health stigma, and I want you to remember those pictures that I've showed you of not the bars across the windows and various other such things. And what we essentially want to do is we want to blur the boundary of outside the building. We want to be able to bring people into the building and that they're having welcoming buildings in the heart of local communities. And we also want people to come in who don't necessarily need our services, but need signposting to other council services or other health services, or actually need a location where they can access those services online if they haven't got the ability to get online. So it's a whole range of wellbeing services we're looking for, and not just mental health. And in our inpatient facility, for example, we've got a gym and a sports hall that we're making, which isn't just open for us, but we want to be a good neighbour and a good community. And the other thing is, we don't think that mental health facilities should be somewhere over there. We reckon they need to be near the shops and local amenities, because that supports local inclusion. It will. Here we go. Let's just make sure. So the co-design process. One of the challenges is that in the middle of the process of designing, we've had this lockdown because of coronavirus. So we started with a vast number of workshops where we went out with clinical planners and architects, and we and our medical director went over and visited, I don't know, it says 50, but I think it was nearer 60 community groups, different wards and various other such things, to share plans and ideas and get feedback. And it was a vast exercise, but it was an excellent exercise because it brought everybody in. And one of the key things I would say is, if you don't worry about using patients and service users to design buildings. What they're very good at is not only just saying what's important to them, but also actually just to challenge professionals and say, actually, you've only got a limited budget. Why are you spending it on that? They've all had to do the daily spend on food and groceries and other such things, so they can manage a budget in a very sensible way that we sometimes forget in the health service. But then COVID came down and we had to run everything virtually. So what we ended up doing was be running virtual conversations like this. We sometimes had 60 or so people on a call, and also a use of videos where we essentially had 2 or 3 minute videos on our website where people could give feedback and then ask questions. So we could either do seminars, we could do videos for people who are unable to attend face-to-face events. The only one thing that's been a disaster is, I don't know if anybody uses DQI and the DQI process. Those events, I think, do need a bit of work and reforming. But other than that, it's been relatively successful. What people told us they wanted, primarily, I've listed here, but essentially more privacy and control on their lives. The wards that we've got at the moment are dormitory wards. That is not good. Sharing your most difficult moments with complete strangers is really not something we should be offering in this century. So people to have single ensuite rooms was above everything else on the agenda. But people are more modern. They want services like actually to have Wi-Fi whilst they're in a facility. They want to be able to have a cafe where they can meet their relatives and such like. And the other areas going through is therapeutic spaces in particular. The idea that there is physical activity space, because we know that's important for mental health well-being, a gym, and finally fresh air. And the key thing to the fresh air wasn't the fact that it was necessarily a beautiful garden, but was inaccessible. it was the fact that it had to be accessible fresh air that people could use really easily, and not when there was additional staff to escort people outside. So we built our new inpatient facility. It's one of the key things is, and I'll show you a couple of images in a second, is that it's a multi-story solution, which is unusual in the UK at the moment, because most mental health buildings are built in greenfield sites. So one of the key things was to have essentially large terraces or balconies where people can exercise for the younger adult wards, or actually have a series of planters and various other such things for the aging mental health wards, for the older people's wards. So that was important, that those outside spaces you could get to without coming off the ward. And we've tried to incorporate them as if they're an additional room. In addition, we're going for roof garden, green walls, and there's a whole load of planting, as you're beginning to see. So we've got planning permission now, and this is the west side of the building. The reason I wanted to show this to you is because, again, I wanted to contrast with the pictures we showed earlier and the pictures that Leah showed earlier of our old St Pancras site. That to us is a statement building saying, actually, we're a mental health trust, but we can still have good architecture and good building for our folk. And just to show a degree of tightness, this is the other end of the building, and you can see a listed building called the Jenner on the left, our building on the right, and a sort of series of trees going up the hill in the background, and that gives us some garden space. But you can see how it's been quite carefully fitted in. Moving just quickly to our community facilities. Again, very much the theme coming through was non-stigmatizing. Very much the theme is that more services under one roof. So what we wanted to do is bring some physical health and well-being services to treat the whole person. If you meet your doctor, it's helpful that you can have access, I don't know, to a charity that helps with relationship problems, tax problems, or benefit problems, or problems with your landlord, and it's there, and you don't have to book another consultation with Citizens Advice Bureau. They're under one roof. So, and the other thing is, even in a densely populated urban environment, there are some places which are easy to get to, and it's easier to be in a place which has got good transport links. And this was particularly important to those living with physical disabilities and anxiety too. One bit that I was going to add again is halfway through this design, we've ended up with coronavirus. And the thing that we are bringing in very much is this idea that we need flexibility. And in our clinical space, we need flexibility because of infection control, and we need to be able to make it larger and smaller. And so we're going very much for multi-size rooms. And our office space, maximum flexibility, and we're beginning to concentrate on group activity rather than solitary transactional activity, which people are quite enjoying doing at home. So it's giving a place where people can meet face to face and have those brainstorming ideas together. And we're going to create more flexibility by the use of furniture than we are by walls. Just a reminder, those are our sorts of community facilities. And I just want to end on with, this is what we're looking to have as a new facility at our St Pancras building, right in the centre of London. And that, again, I believe is a far less stigmatising construction than what we have at the moment. So just to finish up with, and thank you, is the work that Leah did from UCL by looking around the world and looking at these different things, allowed us as an organisation to lift our eyes, lift our aspiration as to what is possible. And that's what we're intending to do. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Evangelia and Malcolm, for your presentation. Just if you have any questions for our speakers, please send them to us at healthcare@stepexhibitions.com. The email address is on the Healthcare Estates website. Please also visit the Healthcare Estates website for information on our other webinars and IHEAM Digital Week. So just to thank you again to our speakers today for your presentation, and thank you to you for watching our webinar.